por la puntualidad y gracias a todos por
Well, once
conectarse.
again, thank you for the punctuality. Thank you for connecting. I think that we can begin so that we can respect everybody's time. Nestor is somewhat complicated. He's going to join us in a few minutes. And I believe then that we would be beginning, as always, with the welcoming words on behalf of Ana Gonzalez from FuseNet. I give you now the floor so that we can begin with today's the conference. Good morning. Good morning to all of you. And thank you, Monica. Thank you for the introduction. Well, as always, giving you the warmest welcome to this space so that we can share information regarding the markets in the region of Central America and the Caribbean. Thank you very much for your assistance. And from FuseNet, we always thank for the input, both for this teleconference as well as for the monthly report. The commitment that has always been demonstrated by all the groups to be able to come to this joint effort to know what are the dynamics that affect not only each one of the countries, but also at the level of the region. So, welcome all of you. A very good day, and I hope that the meeting is very, very productive, very helpful to be able to share a lot of information and wealth of all the knowledge that you have. And with that, I give you the welcoming and opening comments to this webinar seminar. Okay, thank you. I'm going to share my screen, so just to see if everybody can see the version in Spanish of the slides. And if somebody has a problem, please let me know also. Once again, if you need to see the version in Spanish, please select it under the name of Karina at the top part of the screen so that you can change to the correct language. We're looking at the full screen. Are you looking at the full screen? I'm going to share it again. Okay, now we're going to begin the presentation, the conference day, with the regional perspective of weather. We have our colleague Mario Rodriguez. So Mario, I don't know if you prefer to share your screen or if you want me to prefer to share my screen. Thank you. Okay, can you see my screen? I can. Okay, now I see it. Thank you. Yes, thank you. Thank you. Good morning to all of you. Thank you for sharing with us. We are going to, as usual, to make our walkthrough of all the weather conditions that have been observed, as well as a forecast that is expected. In regard to the current conditions, we can see that there are some dry conditions from the long dry period, and that these are continuing in Central America. And looking at the last 3 months of the rainfall, we can see that the areas that are most affected correspond to the border line between Honduras and Nicaragua. And the areas, the red, where we do not have even 60% of the rainfall of the period of the last 3 months, and a very broad zone in orange, where we do not exceed the 75% of the rainfall. If we go to the last 2 months, we can see how the zones increase, and we connect the region of the land with all the central zone of Nicaragua, and it goes up to Brenta. We can also see an increase of that deficit zone, especially in the north of Guatemala and in the east of Guatemala, bordering with Honduras. And it is important to mention here that as we come to the second period of observation, currently on the Pacific region and Central region, we see that the rainfall conditions have a tendency to normalize. If we look at it from September 26th to the 15th of October, and remember that we are coming in the general period of transition to dry season. So normally, if it doesn't rain, the rains are somewhat limited. Well, this gives us the sensation that the rainfall is normal, although in reality it's not so. Well, we can see how the droughts are increasing the Caribbean zone, and especially the borderline with Honduras. And we can see in all the Caribbean zone, all the way from Nicaragua going through Honduras to the northern part of north of Guatemala and Belize, this condition. We can also see how Panama continues on with dry condition, persistent dry condition. And Costa Rica, well, it is present in certain zones, this condition. In spite of the fact that we've had some floodings, as flash floods reported, because of important rainfall accumulation,
reducir el
but
déficit
these rainfall accumulations are not reducing the seasonal deficit, nor do they have a positive result in regard to the development of crops. This is very much related to the current conditions that we have because of the Depression 21 in Guatemala and Nicaragua that had very strong winds and it generated some important rainfall that in general terms can help reduce the deficit of humidity in the long term, but are not going to have any positive impact in the development of the crops. The temperatures are above the average with temperatures approximately to 1 or 2 degrees centigrade, especially in the Gulf of Fonseca and center of Honduras. But in general terms, we can see that our region has been 1 point or 1.5 degrees Celsius above the average of the observation of the last 30 days. With the NDVI also shows some mixed conditions. Some of the areas have some positive vegetation,
Aquí hay dos factores de
despite the
cambio.
fact that they have values underneath the average, but there are field values that are very important here. The first one is that some producers, especially the smaller ones, have decided not to carry out any planting activities because of the irregularity of the rainfall. And what we had generated was natural vegetation. That natural vegetation would be showing positive values of chlorophyll, which makes the NDVI show some of the cases of favorable condition. But field reports state that this is not related precisely to crops, but on the contrary, with that type of vegetation, natural water vegetation. And mixed values because we also have conditions that are below the average, especially in the zone of the Pacific of Nicaragua, next to the Gulf of Fonseca and Honduras, that are very much related to that irregular distribution of rainfall that we have had. With regard to Haiti and the Dominican Republic, well, the same thing, we have some mixed values, but here we also have confirmation that the positive values belong more to natural vegetation. You can see a deficit that is generalized. In all of the Central American region, we can see the station of Flores and Petén, rainfall that is allowing to reduce the deficit, but even so, it maintains very dry conditions during the next 30 days. Section of Mula, in spite of the fact that it has some continuity with regard to rainfall in the last few days, maintains a significant deficit, only one rainfall. They help to reduce the deficit that we had, that we were dragging the last few days of September, as you can see here. And then we had some days without rainfall, which is because of a new period. It is we have in the region of Lebanon, in El Salvador, that we have a continuity of rainfall, but the same has reduced significantly starting in the midst of October. This station of La Unión, the station of in Nicaragua and Ortega, where we can see that practically only 2 rainfalls are the ones that maintain the rainfall close to the average, but with a very erratic distribution. Taking into consideration that the temperatures have also been high, and much of the rainfall high evapotranspiration that has not been useful for the crops. The Atacama station in Honduras, so we can see that the rainfall is abundant, and we can see it in the beginning and the month of September, but maintaining a distribution that is erratic, but close to the average. I've seen important rainfall, uh, no projection.
Perdón,
Solo
creo que hay
Podrían
un
poner en
micrófono
mute ese
encendido.
micrófono,
frijol
por
no.
favor.
No. Frijol, por ejemplo, a veces invitan a un país que dé su...
Ok, gracias. La lluvia, de acuerdo a los modelos
The rainfall, according to the North American models, for the period of December to January shows the average and it's gone above average in the northern part of Nicaragua. And this is the transition period from rainfall to dry conditions. So we're going to have average rainfall. It means that they're not going to have a rainfall and there's not an impact. But nevertheless, if we look at the period from December to February, we see here that in the central part of Honduras and in the Caribbean zone of Nicaragua, where we have a lot of crops and we have rainfall below the average, which are persistent for the period from January to March, and they tend to normalize until the period of February and April. Here, normally we have the beginning of the first season, we would expect the beginning of a normal period of rainfall, and for the period March and May, we see an increase of the rainfall. And remember that as the forecasts are more distant, the certainty is minor, less. The European model shows that normal conditions for November, December, and January, but from December, January, February, just like the North American model, it shows that rainfall below the average in the zone of Nicaragua, although here it does extend from Nicaragua to Guatemala, and the same persists for the period for January, February, and March in all of the Central American region. And finally, the World Meteorological Organization's model, we have normal rainfall conditions for November, December, and January. December and January, February already show those conditions that are going to rainfall both for Guatemala as well as for the zone of production, the production zone in Nicaragua, which will persist throughout the months of February and March. And even this model even tells us the conditions that are below the average for the period for February, March, and April.
Mucho que decir, el
In
modelo
regard to the temperatures, the North American model shows that the conditions will persist going above average. The European model, very consistent with temperatures above the average, and the World Meteorological Organization model also with temperatures above the average. And this analysis that was made by the University of Santa Barbara regarding the events of El Niño, the average rainfall that has been recorded previously versus what we might expect for the period from August to December. Basically, what it shows us is the decrease of rainfall in all of the Pacific zone of Central America, going from the central part of Guatemala, Salvador, the coastal zone of Honduras, Nicaragua, Costa Rica, and Panama. And we have rainfall below the average for the period going from August to December. And the analysis that is made with the forecast of temperature
utilizando los
during
datos
the November period, using the church experimental as well as the use of the European model, show us temperatures above average for practically all of the Pacific zone of Central America and Panama, as well as for the Dominican Republic, and normal conditions or average for the Caribbean zone. Nevertheless, using only the church values for the abnormality, and we do see temperatures above the average in most of the Central American and Caribbean region. It is important to mention that in using only church, these values are more consistent with the Marxist scale models that have been shown previously. In summary, we can say that for the production zone in the Pampa, Nicaragua, we would expect a rainfall below average starting the month of January, and that the high temperatures will be prevailing consistent condition throughout the whole period of observation. Condition factors that have to be taken into consideration is expected, according to the simile, that the cold front season will have between 13 to 16 cold fronts. We have some of them already coming in the month of October, and this will help us reduce the values of temperature in some of the areas and for some period of time, but the temperatures would be consistently above the average in general values. This is important to take into account because the introduction of cold fronts does not mean that we are going to have a normalization of long-term temperatures, but we will have only, this will happen only while these events are taking place. And depending on the intensity of the cold fronts, these might reach zones of the Caribbean, Honduras, and Nicaragua, where also because of the clash of masses, we might generate rainfall that would be focalized and that will help us reduce somehow the deficits that would be expected for the period of observation.
Importante
One of the events is that we are also still in our season of cyclone seasons. We already saw the cyclone event 21 that is affecting the zone of the Caribbean. That fortunately it uh, broke out the day of yesterday, and that it generates some important rainfall in Nicaragua. And we have some events in Central America that is moving towards Mexico. We are not expecting it to impact Central America. Let's remember that when these events that take place in the Pacific, the intertropical convergence zone, it tends to increase, and that increases the rainfall on the land. So these are isolated events.
Pero que en ningún caso mejorarían las condiciones de cultivos en campo,
I think we
siendo
lost Mario.
frijol el que podría verse afectado por ese aumento
That
de
could change.
precipitaciones en estadios fenológicos avanzados del cultivo, lo que
The
también
rainfall
podría
needs that we have
afectar
observed that in the advancement of the crops, this might also affect them by reducing the yield because of the amount of humidity that they might present. On my side, that is all. If you have any doubts or questions, you're more than welcome. Thank you very much, Mario. Thank you for the presentation. Thank you for incorporating additional information into everybody's reference. I don't know if there is any question or comment. You can do it through the chat, or you can raise your hand and do it live. I don't see any questions. I just have one question, Mario. And please forgive me, I had a technical problem here and I disconnected for a few minutes. Could we go back to the slide where we are showing the map related to the Nino, the one of rainfall? That one. In the case of the image on the left, that would be reflecting for the period as well as but especially the conditions for the first of this year. I don't know if we have something similar, taking into consideration the forecast for the next few months, or I don't know if you mentioned that. Yes, it is here in these maps of conditions of expected rainfall. Here we have North American model, and I was making the mention that in the zone of the Pacific, we have normal conditions prevailing because we are in the curve from the rainfall period to the dry season. So it's normal that it doesn't rain. So we have to see the temporality of the forecast, just like in the European model. It is also very consistent with this part, and only in the part of Nicaragua, we have rapid progression in some of the zones of the Caribbean where the models are consistent with the conditions other than the average for the month of prevailing for the month of January. I don't know if there's any question from the rest of the group. If not, could you show the slide of the conclusions, please? No, I did not generate any conclusions. I just mentioned what we might be expecting. I didn't have any conclusions. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Marco, for your question, and Mario, for your presentation. If there is any question further on, you can let us know, and we will be more than happy to pass it on to Mario. Thank you, Mario, and we will now go on to the presentation by June for the part of international prices. Just allow me a second, and I will share my screen in Spanish, and I give the floor now to June. Good morning, can you hear me? Yeah. I hope that you are very well. The next slide, please. Perfect, thank you. The FAO food price index was practically unchanged regarding its value in August. And in September, we found more than 10% below its average a year ago, and 24% below the maximum historical level, which was reached in March of 2022. The stability in September came from the reduction of the prices of vegetable oils, of dairy products, and beef. I mean, it was compensated with the increase of the prices of sugar and cereal. And among those products, what stood out was the index of the sugar price that marked the highest level since November 2010 due to the concern about the global outlook for tighter supply in the Thailand and India, which are the most important producers of sugarcane. On the contrary, the vegetable oil prices have contributed to the increase of the food prices in 2022, reduced in September following the seasonal trends. In the graph on the right, we can see how I mentioned that the sugar prices is in a very, very high price, shown by the orange line. Then the vegetable oils in the green line, much lower than the level of the previous year. The next slide, please.
A los precios de exportación de trigo
Regarding the wheat international prices from the main exporters of the region, in Canada, there is a reducing trend as the price trend continued downward due to the crop in progress. Nevertheless, there is a certain uncertainty regarding when this pressure reduction might increase because of the production in 2023 is expected to be below the average due to the yields affected by the dry conditions. And reflecting this, the offering is forecasted the exports are also expected to be below the average. And now in the United States, where the wheat is a smaller wheat production is also on the way, the international wheat prices increased in September as a result of an international demand, and the price in September were 25% below the previous year. And as we know, that the war in Ukraine and the crop that was affected by the drought in 2022 increased the price. The forecast, the official forecast for the United States aims that wheat production 2023 is going to be slightly above the average and more than 10% above the crop for 2022. Nevertheless, given the strong domestic demand, wheat export is expected to be at a level that is below the average. Globally, the price for wheat export has reduced in September very briefly because of the great offering by Russia,
el proveedor más importante de
who is the main supplier of wheat.
diapositiva, por favor.
The next slide.
Que te interrumpa.
Sorry, June, for interrupting. I'm just trying to mute.
Janet, si puede ayudar a
Maybe if somebody can mute them by muting the microphone. Sorry, June. Thank you.
La siguiente, por favor. Perfecto. Tras descensos consecutivos que observaron en los meses anteriores, los precios de exportación de maíz subieron en septiembre en los principales proveedores para la región, pero estuvieron entre 20 y 30% por debajo de sus niveles.
They were about 20-30% below the levels from a year ago in the United States. Like in the case of the wheat, the prices increased in spite of the crop that began in September. The harvest began in September. And this is due to the increase in the rates of the freight due to the reduction of the level of water in the Mississippi River. Based on this, it is expected that production will be 6% above the average due to the expansion of the area that has been planted because of the high level of price that was seen during the plantation time of this year. And as we can see in the graph, the yellow line has been in a level that is much higher than the level that is observed nowadays. And in South America, the prices increased also as a result of the strong demand in Brazil, and where we had a record crop, and because of the slow sales of the producers in Argentina, where the crops were affected by the drought, and they had a 25% yield below the average. In these countries, the plantation of 2024 is underway, but there were difficulties that have been caused by the conditions that we have, the weather conditions that are adverse. And it would be the dry conditions in Argentina, and then the excessive rainfall in the south of Brazil. The next slide, please. Regarding the export prices of rice, they increased in September. Is for the main exporters for the region. Argentina, Brazil, and Uruguay, the prices increased for the third consecutive month in September, and they were more than 35% above the levels that we had a year ago. And this increased level is due to a high volume of export and the reduced crop in 2023. In these countries, the plantation for the 2024 campaign is underway, and the area that is planted is expected to be somewhat similar to that of last year in Uruguay and higher in Argentina and in Brazil. Nevertheless, the forecast of the rainfall above the average for the next few months increases the concern for the crop of 2024. In the United States, the prices rose slightly in September despite of the ongoing harvest, given the upward pressure coming from
La cosecha de este año se espera oficialmente más de 10% por arriba del promedio como resultado de la expansión del área sembrada. Una cosa que quisiera compartir es que los precios de los Estados Unidos en la línea verde oscuro en el gráfico fueron persistentemente más altos que los orígenes de la América del Sur hasta el julio de este año, ¿no? Debido a esto, al precio alto, la importación de arroz desde América del Sur incrementó en los primeros 7 u 8 meses de este año, desde Guatemala, El Salvador, Costa Rica y Panamá. Y desde agosto 2023, los precios de los Estados Unidos, como pueden ver, que se ubican por debajo de los precios de los orígenes sudamericanos, por lo cual la compra desde los Estados Unidos de parte de la región podría incrementar de nuevo. Mi presentación es hasta aquí. Si tienen algunas preguntas, aquí estoy. Gracias.
Muchas gracias, Jung. No sé si hay alguna pregunta.
I don't know if there's any questions. I see that there are some comments on the chat. Give me a second.
No son preguntas.
There are not questions. I have a question, June, regarding the imports of rice from South America that you have just mentioned. Because I saw a little bit of data, and unfortunately, I have until up to March for all the countries that I was checking. So I don't know if we have had an acceleration or not in the second quarter. But in spite of the information that I have had access to, in spite of the increases that we might have had of purchases from South America, would we maintain the position of the United States as the main uh, exported towards our region. Is that correct?
Es así, sí.
Yes, that is correct.
Confirmado, sí.
Okay, perfect. I don't know if there's any other question for you, or if not, likewise, if you remember something later on, I can pass it on to June a little further on. Thank you very much, June. So now we would go on to the part of the seasonal products. So we're going to go on to the part of the regional prices. I'm going to begin, as always, with the information regarding inflation. And well, in September 2023, the inflation, as you can see it in the graph on the left, it increased yeah, slightly. That's on an average. There are some different trends per country. I would like to talk about that recently. And this has been mainly put under pressure because of the increases in matters related to food, fuel, and transportation. Fuel and transportation, and we continue on seeing the trend of an international increase of the oil prices. And in the case of food, there are some countries that are demonstrating some increase, like for example, Guatemala, Honduras, Panama, and Dominican Republic, as you can see it on the graph on the right. That is something that varies according to the countries, but this has been because of increased products such as horticulture, animal protein, and in some of the cases, some basic grains, as we will see further on. This with regard to September 2022. It is also worthwhile to mention that in Costa Rica, as the prices continued on, as the price level is continuing on the downward trend, especially influenced by the significant strengthening of the colon. And as we can see it in both graphs, it seems that Costa Rica is the a gray line, and as you can see, it is the only country that has reached negative levels. Panama reached a negative inflation level in June, if I'm not mistaken, as you can see it there on the dotted line on the left. But in general, Costa Rica is the only country that has demonstrated a downward trend in the inflation. With regard to the white corn price, talking about the basic range for our region, in September the prices remain stable on an average regarding the previous month, and this taking into consideration the parameters of analysis that we normally take into account as a reference for these looking at these variations. We're talking about 5% approximately. We have the variations on a monthly basis per country, and as you can see, in Honduras, which is one that has reported, it always remains within the level of stability that I was mentioning, but the variation was very close, almost a 5% downward trend, while in Nicaragua we saw a slight increase of 1.2%. It is also important to mention that the prices have not reduced, reduced the magnitude that are expected corresponding to the typical seasonality of this period of the year. And this related to the delays of the plantation of the first production and in the scale of the production that is visible in the region. This has given us the introduction of a basic grain to the market, and this has derived in having elevated prices for a period of time that is somewhat longer. So this is something that you can observe in the graph on the left. That is the evolution of the prices for 2028, and with the exception of some of the very punctual cases, like, for example, Mexico, where we have different conditions due to the favorable crop that has just finished and that has contributed to price reductions. In the case of Central America, well, the prices are maintained in a level that's higher to that of the average. Regarding the last year, which would be September 2022, then the prices show different mixed trends. This is something that you can see on the graph on the right, where it's much muted. And we have some other cases like Nicaragua that have significant increases regarding 2022. Nevertheless, there are some other cases like Mexico that have been mentioned already, or maybe even Honduras, where we register negative variation. And also to mention that in the case of Nicaragua, one of the elements that has to be taken into account is the persistence of the rainfall deficit and also the uncertainty regarding the deficit of the commercial year 2024. And we also see that with data related regarding March 2023, the imports of corn, the import,
no reportaban
Nicaraguan import of white maize, it has not reported any value until this first quarter. And normally, Nicaragua does not import very significant volumes, but it is a point that calls the attention and that contrasts with the rest of the countries where the imports, at least in 2022, and the first quarter of 2023, have been closer to the average. The regional offering of corn is stable in spite of the situation that we have commented. This due to the availability of those positions and because of the small remnants of the crops and because of the first harvest, the harvest. And another important point that we have had, well, we have had extreme climate conditions several consecutive years. This has had an impact different ways is a crop of maize and corn and beans, but it's affected the volumes of production, especially between among
frijol,
the
estas
small producers, different their production cycles. In the case of beans, these affectations are a little more visible. In the case of corn, it is more focalized, but it's an element that has to be taken into account because although not necessarily does it have an impact on the volume of the production, at the country level or even at the regional level, well, these losses between the small producers that do increase the dependence of the market to these groups, and they can also put pressure on the price at a given. With regard to the fuel input and labor, have increased the production costs. It has affected also. It has created a different effects depending on the type of production that we're talking about, and the producers for subsistence and the small producers is greater than that, and the effect to them is greater than that of the commercial producers, but that's the fact that the businesses last year. In regard to the international prices, uh, June was already saying the
resultado de
prices have rebounded in September as a result of different factors. And South America, they are more related to climate conditions, while in the United States, there's some difficulties for the transportation through waterworks, the freight. In regard to the forecast, it's expected that the prices to be close to that levels of 2022, and this has different trends for each of the countries because, as I was mentioning, in the case of Nicaragua, in 2022 they had a very high price. In the case of Guatemala, it would be a price that is relatively stable. So this is something that has to be analyzed with more detail on a country to country basis, but the expectation is that these might be close to that parameter and greater than that of the average. And this based on the uncertainty regarding the Primera harvest, but also of the related to the later crop. It's something that is relevant for some of the smalls, and also this
para poder
contributes volumes of grain to be able to improve the supply. On the other hand, it is also possible to have an affection of the yielding of the corn, of the maize, because of the rainfall phenomena that are associated to the Nino. And this is something that is maybe somewhat complicated for certain zones of Nicaragua or Honduras, sorry, this might uh, increase the period of scarcity for the next year with a possible reduction of reserves in the household in more accentuated poverty conditions and also different households. Going on to the beans, the red beans at uh, prices, the wholesale prices has reported a different trend, mixed trends. It is worthwhile to mention that for a couple of months now, the region or the prices of beans in the region do not have the homogeneous behavior that they used to present, but on the contrary, they are reflecting variations that are very well marked country by country. both for beans as well as for white corn. But in the case of the red beans, in September we had some mixed trends regarding the variation compared to August of this year. For example, in Mexico, Guatemala, and Panama, smaller availability of a local grain or beans because of the conditions, the climate conditions that have increased the price. And while in Costa Rica, the prices remain stable, and in Nicaragua and Honduras, the prices have uh, dropped as a result of the departure of small volumes of primera, but also of the availability of imports to be able to complement the national offering. In regard to yearly variation, the price maintains for red bean above 2022 and the average, the 5-year average, as you can see in the graph on the right. And this is a result of progressive losses in production. We have had some years with affection by the weather. If we remember, we had a drought period in 2018 that also affected somewhat the availability of the reserves for 2019, sorry. And then we had the Iota issue in 2020, and in 2021 we had an irregular period for rainfall, and especially the Postrera season. And in 2022, we had the Julia storm, but we also had the shock of the prices of the input and the transportation. So these are very complicated years, and that have added up to this, and that are also reflected in this very high level of prices and the high level of imports that we are seeing in the region. And just to finalize, to mention the case of the Dominican Republic, where the prices show a different behavior and that they have descended regarding the elevated levels of 2022. This related to the improvements in the national production and a greater availability of imports. Regarding black bean, in September 23, the prices remained stable, and the majority of the countries that consume them, with the exception of Mexico, where the national production is down on the downward trend because of the production of rainfall in the production zones. In Mexico and Guatemala, the prices have remained above 2022, as we can see it here, and the quinquennial average is also values that are adequate for the case of red beans. That is the occurrence of climate conditions, well in the Dominican Republic, Honduras, and Costa Rica, we have some prices that are the average, but each one of the countries have their own context. But in the case of Costa Rica, as I was mentioning, the strengthening of the national currency is something that has improved, in the case of the Dominican Republic, a better availability of the exports and the stability of the local production. Is also something that contributed to the weakening or reduction of the prices as we can see them here. The forecast is the regional offering of red and black beans that's supposed to be below the quinquennial average, and this year, and this because of the adverse climate conditions. And this year, we are not expecting to have a significant change or a significant improvement in those conditions. And we are all aware of the influence of the conditions of the Nino, and also of what Mario has mentioned recently regarding the possible deficit of rainfall for the Rapante season, which for the case of the red bean is the main season for Nicaragua, which is the main supplier of red beans for the region. And we would be observing then an inferior regional offering, as I was mentioning, and this is also something that has an incidence on the prices, and it is expected that export prices from Nicaragua remain above the average. This because of the combination of the strengthening of the demand of imports. We have seen that in the case of Honduras, El Salvador, and Costa Rica, the import has increased from Nicaragua in the last 2 years, last calendar years, and it is expected that this import from Nicaragua is also complemented with imports from other origins. This, for example, for the case of black beans, it might be the United States, Argentina, and Mexico. And for the case of red beans, we have seen that apart from Nicaragua, there are also imports from other origins. And I think that these are, we see some reflected some imports from Ethiopia that although they are not volumes that are significant, or that move in Nicaragua. This is exporter, number one exporter for the region. They are indicational for the search of every beans from other origins to be able to complement the offering. The prices are expected to be maintained above the quinquennial average for 2022. All these conditions, and that also might reflect some seasonal increases that are more visible because there's going to be a smaller uh, availability of reserves regarding the previous cycles, because there are still some remaining from the cycle in development and the rapid season of next year, and it is reducing, and this might bring to a greater demand of the market on behalf of the household and production and subsistence, or production at a smaller scale. And finally, for the case of the rice, as you can see here, the prices remain relatively stable following the trend of export prices, that although the export prices in the United States has demonstrated some slight increases, they have not been so pronounced like the other two grains that we have just mentioned. And for the case of the rice, although we do not see significant variation month after month, well, there are some relevant variations cumulatively. You can see, for example, the variations regarding the average in the majority of the cases, or in all of the cases, with the exception of Mexico, they are positive, as we can see it in the graph on the right. And the variations regarding the previous year have mixed trends, and just like in other cases, with reductions, with slight reductions, and with reductions in Mexico, Guatemala, Costa Rica, Honduras, for example. And well, in Mexico, the prices have reduced regarding the previous year, and this is a result of an adequate availability of the imports, and also for the based on the strengthening of the peso, the Mexican peso. So, as a forecast, the regional offering of rice is very close to the average. This coming from local production and imports, mainly from the United States. And also, it is important to mention that we have been pointing it out, but it is important to say that we should mention it here also, that reduction in the national production in some of the countries, for example, El Salvador, it has been reporting this for a while now. Honduras also, for a couple of 1 or 2 years, they have reported this, and this year has been more visible in Costa Rica. This due to commercial policies. In the case of Costa Rica, we have the route of the rice that has changed a little bit. The commercial policy regarding this cereal, and well, somehow this is affecting the national production. And also, is a free trade agreement, tariffs reduction with the United States is one of the main crops for the national production because of the difficulty of competing with the prices of imports from that country. And this is going to result in that the country will maintain its dependence on the imports to be able to cover for the requirements of consumption. And it is foreseen that that the exports might increase based on the lower cost of importation imports that are associated, in this case, not with the international favorable price, but with a tariff reduction. In regard to the prices, they seem to be stable, and they will be close to that of 2022. Nevertheless, it is possible that we will continue observing these small increases month after month, that although in some of the cases they do not even exceed the 3%, well, cumulatively, it is a little more evident, this trend towards the increase. And that's where I would close up my presentation. I would leave my preliminary conclusions in the presentation that I'm going to send you, because we want to take advantage of the last few minutes of the session to deal on topics with the delegates of the central region. So I don't know if there is any question, any doubt, any comment. I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I will pass the preliminary conclusions in the presentation that I'm going to send to you. Questions, comments? Yes, I just want to make an observation. And more, it's more a question. if has it been anticipated that the war in Israel might have some sort of influence on the prices? The war that is taking place in Israel. Uh, for the moment, I don't have the information to be able to pass it on to the price trends in Central America, in the case of Central America. But nevertheless, we might be able to observe an effect caused by the increase in the price of fuels and the consequences that this might bring along to the transportation costs, especially in the next few months. But that is what I could tell you at this moment. We have not carried out any punctual analysis regarding that point. Thank you very much. Is there any other question, comment? Okay, so I thank you once again, and we would go on then to the rounds of update by country. We will share a new format. The idea is that each one of the countries might be able to share the most relevant regarding the supply of the supermarkets or the price trends, depending on the context of each one. We know that we have situations that are very particular in Guatemala and Dominican Republic that are more related to closing, border closings and other situations of blockages and so forth. So maybe you can refer to that. And the second question, generated question, would be more related to matters related to the prices of the basic grains and the evolution of the crops. So I don't know if we can begin maybe with Panama, if you are around, to respect a little bit time and not to extend too much in this part. I would give the minute of 3 to 4 minutes per country, if that's okay with you, and I will tell you when you have to finalize your presentation so as not to make it too extensive. So if we have Panama. I don't see Jonathan around here. If If not, we can continue with Costa Rica, which is the next country online. Hello, Monica, colleagues, how are you? Good morning, Priscilla. Go ahead, please. With regard to the first point that we have seen, that information of the country, just to let you know that in October, the executive decree for the import of 8,224 tons of beans with a preferential tariff, that would be 0% in Costa Rica. So they might be bringing this grain to this country, to the country. And as we saw, the bean here continues on having constant prices without much fluctuation. And nevertheless, in the matter related also that was being mentioned just now regarding the rice, then there's a little bit of stability with the price, but this is something that's affecting the producers because they are looking for other types of crops because if the industrials are preferring to import than to continue on buying the national production. Nevertheless, we know that Costa Rica is not a country that is a producer of grains. We depend of countries that produce these commercially, but these things that are affecting us are affecting a little bit the national rice production. And with the last issue, in this case, Costa Rica, with instead we have problems with the Puerto Rican, which is in the south of the country. This week we have the closing period, and, and this has caused to have a problem by climate conditions, and they are also presenting smaller yields of 0.7 tons per hectare, and they're also having that they are having problems of plagues and illnesses, and they're going to have a smaller harvest during this period. And nevertheless, because of the effect of the weather, mainly because of the effect caused by the Nino, the government has been training the producers in the zone so that they can also have the tools so that their yield is not so much affected in their harvest. This is what we have. For Costa Rica, I don't know if you have any additional questions. If you would like to, would like us to clarify. Any questions for Costa Rica?
Perdón, Priscila, creo que fui yo la que tuvo aquí un apagón. Pero, ok.
Sorry, Priscilla, I think I
Marcio,
was
¿alguna
uh,
consulta
knocked out of
para
the
Priscila?
presentation for a while. I don't know if we have any questions for Priscila.
Si no, le agradezco mucho la
We
conversación.
thank you
Se
for the
agradece
update
mucho la
that you have given us.
conversación.
We will go on to
Quiero ver con
Nicaragua.
Marcio, Honduras.
Don Marcio from Honduras, sorry. Don Marcio from Honduras. Good morning to all of you. In regard to the questions, the harvest, the primera harvest of grains has been very satisfying both in maize and corn. And it is expected that very shortly for the month of November, we expect the crop of maize to be harvested. There's optimism, and we expect to have a satisfactory problem without a problem in a procera harvest that is also being taken place right now. And we have good conditions. So in range, we have no difficulty at this moment. On the contrary, we have our prices that to this date, we are having the prices that are equal to that of 2022 and 2023 for maize and corn in this uh, first half of October. The prices are practically equal to the principal prices.
Perfecto. Marcio, solo una
Perfect. Thank
consulta
you.
con la cosecha de
I
Procera.
suggest a
No sé
question
si
regarding the
han tenido
Procera
un reporte de retraso
crop. I don't know if you have had
en
any
zonas
report of
y todo
delays
bien.
in any of the zones or if anything has been on time. To this moment, the report that has been given to me by the engineers of the Secretariat is that everything is is happening in excellent conditions and there is no complaint of loss of crops or any problem caused at this moment.
Gracias. Y
Thank you.
discúlpeme la pregunta.
And please
Sé
forgive me
que
for
toda la
asking.
información no tiene
Do you have information? If you don't have the information, you understand, but I know that you monitor in Nicaragua also. That's why I'm going to ask you.
podría
I don't
indicar
know if
si
you
hay algún
have
informe de los reporteros
any
de cómo va
report
la cuestión allá en
that you may give
Procera,
regarding
porque
how
Nicaragua
it's
sí
doing there in Nicaragua
bastante
for the
distinto
Postura
en
because
cuestión de
Nicaragua has been
precios, por
behaving
ejemplo, de maíz
very
con
differently in
respecto
regard to
al
prices.
resto de la
For
región.
example,
Entonces,
the
si
maize
tiene
regarding the rest of the region.
información
So I
sobre
don't know if you have any information
la
regarding
cosecha de primera,
how
de
the
para
harvest of Primera or is doing. I'm going to see it with the
sí, no, no se
reporter
preocupe,
because I'm not foreseen that.
nos platicamos.
Okay, I'm
Gracias.
going to talk to him and we'll talk.
Sí,
June,
don Marcio, quisiera
Marcio,
preguntar
I wanted to ask you.
si, bueno, primero qué bien que no
Well, first of all, it's good that
haya una
there are
afectación
there's not an infection, either of Primera or Prostrata, but
Mario había presentado
as Maria had presented,
condiciones climáticas
the
severas
climate
que
conditions, the dry climate conditions that
al
have been
sur de la
presented
región.
throughout the region.
Entonces quisiera solamente preguntar
So
si
I would like to ask if within among the producers,
productores
the small producers,
hubo pérdidas
was there not all the
marginales
losses, not
de los
marginal
cultivos
losses or
debido a esas condiciones
of the crops due to
o
those dry conditions, or in the case of Honduras, the weather conditions have been in general favorable for the crops. I would like to ask you. The biggest problem in Honduras has been what we call the dry corridor. Nevertheless, the forecast for this year have been the drier area and the northern zone, coastal zone in the Pacific. So there have not been any notice of infections, but the other thing is that a provision that the government does and the technological aspect was enough for the small producers to be able to supply their own subsistence and small production. So we have no reports of big accusations. Thank you.
Gracias, don Marcio.
Thank you, don
Una
Marcio.
consulta
I just have here one question from Hilda. I'm going to read it. If here in the chat it says, it is foreseen that the government might give
¿Se tiene alguna
some support to the
información
producers,
del estado de los
or
pásticos y la
do you have any
producción?
information regarding the status of the condition? In regard to the government, the government has what they call the technological bond. So this is for the first and also second in Postera. In Postera, it is still to be seen, but the news is that we have from the agronomists is that up to now we have not had any effect and no municipality has declared any alert in this sense, and so therefore it is working as a technological bond that is given to these small producers, and the production zone is also expecting a satisfactory harvest. The only thing is, of course, we have some elevated prices, but it has been leveled with the price of the previous year, and that they were always raised very high compared to 2021. They were out there, but it was because of all those factors that have been mentioned. The input, especially the effect caused by the input, the prices reduced, but they were never went down to the levels that they had before the pandemic. And a clear example of that was the urea, which was at 600. It went up to be 1,400, and it has come down to even 800. So we don't have any effect, and the price is almost the same as 2021 to this day.
Ok, muchas gracias, Marcio. Gusto
Okay, thank you,
saludarlo.
Marcio. It's a pleasure to see you.
Con
We will
Janet,
go on to Janet
Dominicana,
from the Dominican
interpretadora
Republic
española. No sé, Janet,
in Guatemala.
tenemos por aquí, así que sí. Si
So
tiene acceso a micrófono,
if you have access to a microphone, we will give you the floor.
Hola,
Hello,
hola Mónica.
hola, Janet, adelante.
Monica. Hello, Janet. Go ahead, please.
Muy poca
Yes,
cosa que de
I
verdad
have very little to say
con relación a
with
las dos
regard
preguntas
to
enviadas.
the two questions that you sent.
Tenemos que, por
We have
ejemplo, sobre el
that, for
niño,
example,
se mantiene
regarding the
información
Nino,
sobre la prensa.
we have information regarding
Sobre el niño.
the
Entonces, con relación al arroz,
Sam, I think is what she said.
como comienza en
Regarding
noviembre y
the
está
rice, and she had mentioned that the it was November and the maize
con tomate y
was
tomate.
harvested to rotate with
La
tomato and
mayoría
tobacco.
de estos cultivos
The majority
comienzan
of
en el
these
primer
crops
semestre.
is from the first
Del segundo, o sea,
of the first
que
semester of the year.
quiero decir que todavía el
I want to
fenómeno
tell you
del niño no ha afectado la producción de arroz.
the phenomenon of the Nino has not affected the
Otra es,
production of rice
he estado
nor
advirtiendo
beans.
sobre el ahorro de
The
agua
plantation is in November,
y
and we
hasta
have been
ahora
talking
hemos
about
tenido una
the
buena
saving water,
cosecha
and
en
up
el
to this moment, we
sector,
have had a very good uh,
salvo las
harvest in the
afectaciones
different items,
de la
except
mostaza.
for the
Ustedes
affectation of the
conocen
mustacia.
mostaza
I know
cuando
that this
pasó el
has nothing to
huracán,
do
que
with the
tuvieron el
beans,
paso
but
del huracán Fran.
we had for the passing of the Hurricane
No
Francis.
tengo
And up to this moment,
demasiado detalle,
I don't have much detail,
estoy
but
tratando
I am trying
de
to
coordinar con Karina
coordinate with
para
Karina
ver cómo te envío esa
so that we can see
respuesta
how we can send you that response
con una mejor explicación.
with a better explanation. Okay?
Gracias, Janet.
Me
Thank you,
disculpan
Janet.
y muchas
And
gracias.
please forgive me and
No se
thank you very
preocupe,
much.
muchas gracias. Yo
No,
solo
don't
tengo una
worry. It's
consulta
okay.
rapidita.
I just have a very
He
quick question.
observado que
I
en
have
los
seen
últimos
that
días
in some of the
de
days
septiembre
in September,
hubo un poco de reducción en el
there
precio
was
del
a
egg.
little
Solo
reduction
quería
in the price
chequear
of
si eso
egg.
podría estar
I just wanted to
relacionado
check,
con el
if that
cierre
could be
de
something
las
related to
fronteras con Haití
the closing
o si
of
tiene
borders
alguna
with Haiti,
información sobre
or
eso.
Tú,
do you have some
tú
information
sabes que
regarding
es
it?
un tema ese, ¿verdad?
You know that that
Entonces,
is a
claro
problem.
está,
So, of course,
el mismo
it's
problema
clear that it's
que
the same
estamos
problem
enfrentando con
that we are
Haití.
presenting with Haiti.
Ellos no, tú
Uh,
sabes que ellos son los
you
mayores
know that they are the
que se
greatest,
surten de los
the ones that
pollos
supply
y ahora mismo no
the most amount
están
of eggs at this moment.
dando esa cabida
They
de
are not giving
comercializar.
this possibility of
Vamos a
buying.
ver hasta cuándo
We are going to see up to when
va a seguir esa situación, pero sí,
and
el
this
precio
trend will
va a
continue. But
seguir
yes,
subiendo.
egg has reduced in its price very much.
Porque
For
hay
the,
que salir de
the
eso. Tenemos una sobreproducción y hay que
we
salir
have to
de
get rid of
eso.
that. We have an overproduction, and we have to get rid of it one way or another, right?
Es un tema
So, but it's
un poco delicado.
a
Sí,
very long issue and somewhat delicate.
muchas gracias por la actualización.
Yes.
Y
Thank you, Janet. Thank you for the update, and we surely will be in contact further on to be
pero
able to talk about
le
other issues.
agradezco y qué gusto
But I thank you,
escucharlo.
and it's a pleasure to listen to you once again in the teleconference.
Pasaríamos,
Igual yo a ustedes, de verdad.
Same here on my side, really,
gracias, Janet.
honestly.
Pasaríamos
Thank you, Janet. We will go on to the team from Guatemala, please. If you are there and you want to present your report. Guatemala. I don't know if Danilo, that's also, I think, if not, we can give the floor to El Salvador and we will finalize with Guatemala. Have some sort of technical problem. Good morning. Thank you, Monica. I just have a couple of answering the two questions regarding the supply, the current supply, regarding the trends of prices. During the last month, we have not seen variations in the price tendencies in the basic grain. At least during the month of September, we had some slight increases because of the seasonal issue, mainly because we are coming to the end of our remaining of the remnants of the previous harvest. But nevertheless, we do not have the detail of the imports coming from Nicaragua regarding the red bean. In regard to the maize, part of the Primera harvest that came out, so we are good with supply of maize. The price that we had for September was stable. And what we have in October, we have seen some reductions. Another one of the points, for example, maize and sorghum has had some considerable reductions. Now, the crops, in regard to the prices, we expect that the trend for the next few weeks it will be on a downward trend because we will have the total exit of the Primera of maize, and we hope that for the second week or third week of November, we will have the final of the harvest, national harvest. In regard to the forecast for the production of Primera, in the survey, the expectation for December was carried out in the month of April, and before the beginning of the rainy season. And we visited all the departments, but this information of the expectations as such is not the official data, but it's just it's an estimate of what might be produced during the season 2022, 2022, 2024. This is the information we will have once we finish the national survey that will be produced regarding 2024. There was that has started to be carried out in the field in this month of October. That is what was expected for the expectations for uh, corn. We have 18.5 million quintals of beans, 2.4 million sorghum, 2.4 million quintals, and rice. We expect to have a production of 266 quintals. This is all estimates, and although it might be very close to the data, the weather that has prevailed during the season might cause some variations in the quantities because we have not had the same amount of rainfall during the uh, period of the growth of the plant. So this is the information that we will have during or starting the next month, next year. But for the moment, this as we have is only estimates. Thank you, Nestor. I just have a question for you regarding the white corn, the white maize. I don't know if I guess that you continue on observing the availability, the considerable availability of import cereal in the market, or has there been a change that in the market the import has reduced a little bit because the wholesalers are well supplied with the with the national product. Apart from that, in spite of the fact that we have the national maize, the importer is continue on being sold because it has a niche of consumers that continue on preferring it, in spite of the fact that it is still with the price of the previous month and not with the current price. But they have, as we say, a niche that is very large of uh, merchandisers who use it for the manufacturing of tortillas and pupusas. I prefer it because the cooking is much faster than the national corn. But the percentage that we used to see in the midst of the year was maybe 60% imported, 40% national. And at this moment, to this day, we could say that it is 80% national and 20% imported.
Muchas gracias, Néstor.
Thank you
June.
very much, Nestor. June, you have a question?
Hola, Néstor, muchas gracias.
Hello, Nestor. Yes, thank you. I would like to ask if this 18.7 million quintals of white maize that you expect, which is the expectation or the estimate of the production for this year, according to the data that I have, then it would be above the average, right? Could you confirm that? Is it above the average? Yes, the expectation as such is above the average, but the average is the official production. The expectation is always a little higher than what we expect. So at the end, the reduction that we might have in the worst of the case might be 20% below. In the worst of the case, is 20% variation, and we will be very close to the average. Okay? Thank you.
Gracias, Néstor. Gracias, June.
Thank you, Nestor. Thank you, June.
Finalizaríamos
And we
con
will
los
finalize
países
with
que
Guatemala.
tienen acceso.
I don't know if we have access already, but Guatemala, yes. Good morning, Monica. Good morning, colleagues.
¿Cómo está?
Good morning,
Adelante.
Danilo. How are you? Thank you. Please forgive for some technical difficulties that we had. Okay, I just tell you a little bit of the information regarding the prices. Regarding the price of the grains for the month of September. Regarding this, the white, the yellow corn, and rice have had a slight reduction with variations that do not exceed the minus 1%. And with the exception of the black beans, the trend has been the same that we have foreseen in the last few months towards an increase with a variation of 0.96%. And nevertheless, in the month of October, we have recorded a slight increase for the first 2 weeks because of the limitations transit and locomotion regarding the effects that are seen. So this makes it that somehow the prices have been increased, and in reality, not too much, but so starting the first week of from the 15th to this date, well, the prices have had a normal behavior, and they continue on dropping to the level that they were before, with minimal variations regarding the estimates. So the prices go back to their normal behavior. In regard to the contingencies, they are contingencies that have been authorized there for some months now, or at least the last of the is it was in May for the white maize, and well, we are having a proportion of use in the case of yellow corn of 47.72%, and white maize, uh, black beans. He said the percentages were quite fast. Sorry. The volumes were activated by the Ministry of Economy in regard to the yellow corn, 16,000 metric tons, white corn, 72,000 tons, and black beans, 52,000 tons. This would be the matters of contingency prices. And regarding the estimate of production, well, the geographic information and the management of risk and the ministry has made an estimate for 2023, and this is at the level of all the season. and it has foreseen a production of 47 million 772,000 quintals. That's equivalent to 22 million uh, uh, X amount of metric tons. Sorry, you mentioned that way too fast. And it's something that we still have pending, the levels of production of the year 2023. In regard to the second topic of how the development of the crops is happening, we have that the majority of the country, especially the Petén region, the northwest and the northern part, are already in the phase of producing fruit, and others in the doubling, and others in harvest. Uh, Regarding the white corn, that would be the primera harvest. And in regard to the bean, well, we have the development between uh, uh, growth 1, growth 2 in the northwestern region, and flowering in some of the parts of the southeastern part. That is the report that we have regarding the crops. That, with the support of Alicore, we are elaborating these reports. This report is to the October the 10th, 2023. The development of the second harvest, we have a development that is very similar to with beans, and regarding the north, west, and the southeast regions, they are in the growth, and the second harvest of a crop, we have the growth of 1 and growth 2 in the southwest, sorry, in the southeast, and some practices of harvest in the southeastern region. In regard to the agricultural that we have for the crops, in regard to maize and beans, we have losses that have been reported by the SOR for 73,000.72 hectares, 51,879.09 that corresponds to maize, and 327.23 that corresponds to beans. This is caused by the droughts and damages by rainfall. Well, we have a total of 6,828 hectares, and only in the crop of maize. The departments that have been affected are La Paz, Progreso, Zacapa, and different areas of the country. Simula, San Marcos, and Zacatepec. Well, basically, those are the comments of the opinions of the wholesalers, is that the winter has been somewhat peaceful because of the Niño, so it is considered that maybe there might be some late rains and so forth, so there might be some affections caused to the supply. So these are topics that they are taken to consideration and mentioned. That would be my participation, and thank you very much.
Gracias, Danilo. Jun, adelante.
Thank you, Danilo. June?
Sí, gracias, Danilo, por la
Yes, thank you,
presentación.
Danilo, for the presentation.
45 millones de quintales de la producción para
45 million
2023
quintals
que has
of the production for
mencionado,
2023 that you have mentioned.
ya tiene en cuenta
That is something that
áreas
you already have,
afectadas
have taken into account the affected
por
areas
por sequía
of the maize and beans that you have mentioned that caused by over excess rain and drought. Yes, I said that is an estimate that was carried out, and this was carried out in the middle of the year, and we used the proportions for the losses, not the real ones. They are estimates. They are based on estimates, taking into account all the factors.
¿Podría
Yes, thank you.
indicar
Could you
entonces
state
para
that
maíz blanco,
for white corn,
45 millones, cuánto
within those 45 million, how much
cuánto para
it would be for the corn and how much for the beans? Do you have that information?
Danilo?
Danilo?
Ah, sí.
Sorry, I had my closed. That would basically correspond to maize,
Y luego el
those
área
45 million quintals.
afectada de
And
maíz
what
que
about
usted
the area
mencionó,
affected
en total
by
sería
maize that you have affected? The
54.
total would be 58
Sí, porque
of maize. No, we have 52
sí, sí,
percentage wise, and
20 áreas, ¿verdad?
by drought and
Muchas gracias, Danilo.
1,000 hectares, right? Yes, perfect. Thank you.
Gracias, Danilo. Yo solo tengo una
Thank you,
consulta
Danilo. I just have one question,
sobre
one quick question. I don't know if
información
you have any information
sobre si
regarding
se está entregando o se está
if
proporcionando algún
we
tipo
are
de asistencia para los
delivering or are you
agricultores
providing
o
some sort of
solamente
assistance to the producers? Yes,
Yes.
basically the programs for assistance to the producers. These are issues that the ministry has permanently in action. Assistance and training.
Ok,
Okay,
muchas
perfect.
gracias. Creo que con esto
Thank you.
concluimos la ronda
I
de
think that with that
preguntas.
we
Nada más
conclude the rounds per country. So now we only have, I don't know if you have any questions. If not,
Nos restaría
we would just
acordar la
have
fecha de la próxima
to agree the
reunión.
date for the next
Esta
meeting,
sería la última del
and
año.
it would be the last
Entonces,
meeting of the
¿les
year.
parece
I
bien
don't know if
el
everybody feels
13 de
okay.
diciembre?
Wednesday, December the
¿Tienen alguna
13th.
o si tienen
If that
algún
is
otro
okay for
día
you, or if you have any
nuevo?
problems, just let me know. Wednesday, December the 13th.
Diciembre.
December. The question was December or November? It's
Navideño.
December. Wednesday, December the
Si a
13th.
todos les funciona,
If
yo
all
les
questions, I don't know
estaría
if that's okay for everybody. I would be sending out the
enviando la
invitation
fecha cuando les comparta la
when I
presentación
share
y
the
Nelson les
presentation.
enviaría la convocatoria
And that's
cuando ya estemos cerca
will send you the summons
de ese día.
once we're close to the date.
Creo que con
Okay?
eso concluimos.
I think that with that, we will conclude.
Les pediría a los
I would